Hi everyone and welcome to the Novelty Incubate Startup Talk. Today's talk is with Tilo Hergarten of DHL, where he is working as the Corporate Startup Manager. A special word of welcome to our Novelty Advanced community and the members of Incubase. My name is Rens Dommerot and I'm part of the Startup Acceleration team at Novelty. We organize these talks to give you access to some of the greatest startup founders, so you have a platform to ask all your related questions. We cannot organize these talks alone, however, so therefore a big thank you to Joe Lauver and the Alumni Office for their support. If you are a guest at this talk, interested in innovative entrepreneurship but have no idea how to start or where to look, I challenge you to go to novelty.com/start. There we help you with our Start Bootcamp and our Start program. And for now, I hand over the presentation to our innovative powerhouse, Peter Langela, who will guide you through the session. Thanks, Peter, and everyone, enjoy.
Yes, thank you, Rens. Welcome, Tilo. Welcome, everybody in this Zoom. And let's start with the first question. You work for DHL Deutsche Post. Can you tell a bit about what the company is about?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. The company, DPDHL, I think, is one of the biggest companies in the world with more than 550,000 people working for it. So I assume most of the people in this call are familiar with it. What we're doing is we're the logistic provider all over the world. We're in 220 countries, even those that are not officially acknowledged as countries. And we're doing several kind of services from parcel deliveries up to express and supply chain, all kind of things in the logistics industry, and that's pretty much what we're doing. Yeah, in a nutshell.
It's quite a big company, a huge company, international. While we're talking about the startups, and Deutsche Post has this Startup Lab. Why has such a big company a lab for small startups?
Well, that's a good question. So what we're doing in Startup Lab basically is we're the worldwide incubation program for all the employees that work in Deutsche Post DHL. So whenever they have an idea they think is worth going for it, they can apply, and we support them with tools and methodologies, basically because we think that in these times of digitalization, there is no too big to fail anymore. And even small companies and emerging startups out there that are also in the logistics industry can threaten our business model. And therefore, we always refer to that little red book in Facebook that every new employee gets. Basically, we have to find what kills our business model ourselves instead of having anyone else doing it. And therefore, we will look for these innovative opportunities and develop them and hopefully improve our own operations, our own processes, but also come up with new potential business models.
Okay, interesting. I come back on that. But first, I want to ask you, what is your role in the Startup Lab?
So my role in Startup Lab is also being responsible for the whole program management, how to set it up, what kind of building blocks you have in there, and how you guide the teams through it. But also really working with the teams, sharing experiences as I have as being a founder myself before joining DPDHL, and really sharing the experiences, guiding them through that whole process, giving them some guidance also how to use these kind of methodologies that we have, like most of the people have heard of lean startup, design thinking, etc. And whatever is best for them to actually test things in a small and lean way and then building it up. And then also what we're doing is lots of politics, that stakeholder management and so on. So we're pretty hung up high in the structure of our company. So the teams have the chance to actually pitch in front of the corporate board, which is something very special, I would assume, compared to also other companies. So then they will get the chance to pitch in front of the corporate board, ask for the investment that they need to get into the next iteration round and continue their project.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. You mentioned the word politics. You studied in Osnabrück. You have a Master of Arts, Politics and Government. When did the entrepreneurial startup virus hit you?
But during studies, definitely. So it was in 2010. I did an internship in Hong Kong and got back, and then with all these kind of contacts and network that I built up over there, I thought there's something that you can do with it, be it importing stuff from China and so on. So we started off with a small online shop. Then it worked quite well during studies, but it was really hard for us to compete against all the big Amazons and what else out there. So kind of changed the ideas and then started my cocktail business, which is pretty funny during studies because you tend to drink more than you would do not studying. So I liked that idea a lot, and I built this bike, which I intended to develop it to a franchise system, so everyone could get a bike, learn how to make these cocktails, go out and sell it in the park or somewhere else. And
yeah,
that's what
I read about
studies.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I noticed is that the company name is Cocktail-fiets.
That's actually true.
Fiets is a typical Dutch word. You know, you have bike in English and Fahrrad in German. But why Cocktail-fiets?
Well, where I was raised in Münster, which is quite close to Enschede. That's also why I spent the first 2 semesters studying in Enschede, actually. It's a word that's pretty common for us in Germany as well. And I didn't want to call it cocktail bike because there was the coffee bike and so on as well. So I wanted to be distinguished from the other ones, and that's why I took that name, and I liked it a lot. So that's basically the reason for this.
We like it also.
Yeah.
But on some moment, you did also a year study in the University of Twente, right? Because from Münster, it's close by. Did you live on the campus, or did you stay in Münster?
No, I stayed in Münster, but I had friends living in Enschede, so I stayed a couple of nights, and were also able to experience the party nights in Enschede, so I enjoyed that as well, but I didn't live there. Yeah,
so there's a good party life in Enschede at the time?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as far as I can remember.
So you have experience in Osnabrück, in the German university, Twente, Dutch university.
Yeah.
What is the main difference?
The main difference, I would say, is I think the way they were teaching the subject in Enschede was at that time already more structured, and they had more experiences in doing that. And in Germany, it was more like you could put together different things. The structure was probably less organized, I would say, which is not meant in any negative way, but you had some kind of more freedom to also look for other subjects that you were interested in. For example, I did some courses in law and history as well. So yeah, but anyway, I enjoyed both of it. It was more the private situation that led to moving to Osnabrück with my girlfriend at that time.
Okay. Do you have experience also with some Dutch startups and German startups, and can you see a difference there?
Yes, I do. Well, in the context of that corporate incubation program in DHL Startup Lab, so because we have applications from all over the world, basically, and there were also some from the Netherlands. And also what we did is we were traveling around before COVID times, obviously, to talk about our program, to let the people know what it's about, so to get them interested in that, all that kind of stuff, and also apply for this. And what I experienced working with people in Germany and Dutch people is that I think the Dutch people are way more innovative in terms of thinking, like to adapt to those methodologies, lean startup, design thinking, and so on, much quicker and better than German people do it. Germans are more like that strict kind of way of working, that engineering style, everything has to be perfect. It needs to be 100% before we put it out there, and not like, let's test it in a very quick way, put it out there on the market, see how it works for the customers as well, and then iterate it and move on. So I think that's the biggest difference. So more like testing and flexible in a way of working with things than Germans are.
Okay, and what can we learn from German startups?
That's a good question. So it's really hard for me to answer. So I don't think there's too much what you can learn.
So what's popping up in my mind is being pünktlich.
Yeah.
To the point, gründlich. This is things that we have in mind when we think on German companies.
Those things they definitely come up in my mind as well. And not only working with startups, but also spend some time during studies analyzing German and Dutch cooperation between small and medium-sized companies, and there's definitely a difference. So if you say let's meet at 3 p.m., then the Dutch colleagues are pretty likely to be there at 3:15, and then also the way on how you agree on things sometimes are differently interpreted from Dutch people and German people. But I think those are cultural differences as well, and you just need to understand in order to also see how this collaboration is actually working, and it's not a thing that both sides do on purpose. It's just really cultural aspect that you need to consider. So yeah.
Yeah, I worked myself some time in Germany, and also one of the differences I remember is how to be formal to co-workers. You know, we call each other after one day, "Hey Peter, grab me a coffee" or something. And in Germany, you don't say by the first name, but Herr, Mister, and etc. Is it still valid, or is it changing?
It's still valid, definitely, especially in bigger companies. People you don't know, you would never call them by their first name, things like that. But it's changing, I would say. So especially working in a startup environment, it's not there anymore, I would say. But in the corporates, I'd say it's still there, and a lot of people still pay a lot of attention to this as well. And yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's something I noticed. Let's have a look to the website. It's now on my camera screen. We see Startup Lab. Is it a facility, a room that you offer, space?
Unfortunately not. That's something that we would love to offer to our teams, but we don't do. We are actually located in the Deutsche Post Tower in Bonn, which is quite nice, but it's not that startup environment. But what we do is, again, before COVID, is we invited a lot of the teams to come over to Germany because they enjoy having a chance to visit the Deutsche Post headquarters and so on. And we would then eventually rent some startup places that we know around and meet there in order to still provide that kind of different work setting and environment, and being able to work in groups and teams and so on. Yeah.
Okay. And I see that there are a lot of applicants in between, over 1,700. These numbers are still accurate?
Yes, probably even more, but I'm not 100% sure on the correct numbers up to date, because we are about to start the 5th batch. So as you can assume, being the incubation program for all employees of the DHL worldwide is a high number of applications, definitely, yeah.
So in a batch, how much applicants can you handle there?
It depends. So we try to handle as many teams as possible with our own coaches that we have within the team, but we also work together with external suppliers that support us in coaching and expertise on specific topics. So usually we have in the first round something between let's say 10 to 20 teams. It really depends on how the teams are and the project themselves. But let's say around 15 teams, I would say that's a number that we can handle at the very beginning. Yeah.
I see the 5-step startup. It's a short program. I compared it with our start bootcamp. We do this in half a day, 4 hours. Similar things. How successful is that?
Sorry?
How successful is this 5-step startup?
This 5-step startup is for us basically some kind of also an information event, which we also used when we were on the roadshow in several countries to give the people or giving them the chance to experience how the process would be like if they would be accepted for our core program. They can either bring their own idea or make use of the ideation process that we have within the 5-step startup and then run through it. So how to test it, how does the business model look like, and then finally also put together a pitch which they can use in order to apply for our program or pitch it in to their colleagues in case they need more resources on that, for example, if they want to continue with it.
Okay. Well, what I also noticed that you organize fuck-up nights.
Yeah, we do.
What is that?
The fuck-up nights is something that we call them like that within the corporate. That's why you can see the way it's written. It's quite tough to establish this kind of format in a corporate environment. But what we do there is we invite people, usually internal people, and external people, startup founders, to share their experiences and especially on what did not work. So what kind of fails did they have in the past? Internal people could be with some projects that didn't work out and it was just a waste of money. And startup founders sharing the experiences on how they failed with their first ideas and their business model and whatever it is, so that people would have the chance to learn from it.
That's a nice one. Can you share a learning? What is one of the most common fuck-ups they made? Do you have an idea about it?
Some of the most common fuck-ups. Well, that's a good question because I haven't been to every fuck-up night, but probably what I can tell from my own experiences, and I would have also shared during the fuck-up nights, is that a lot of people, especially external startup founders, they start putting something together because they can and not because there's a real customer interest or anything. So what happens is, and that also kind of happened to me, is with that Cocktail-fiets, which I built, I thought that's a nice idea and people definitely want to have it. And if I go out there in the streets, in the park, people are going crazy and buy all these cocktails. So what I didn't check before is that I'm actually not allowed to be everywhere I want to be and sell these cocktails. It's just really a closed thing. I can apply for certain places within the city where I can stand, and those were only 4 back then in Osnabrück. So my opportunity for doing that was quite limited, but I had already started putting the bike together and so on. So I had to switch the business model and make it a private kind of service that you could book for your wedding, for your birthday. And that, really forced me to think about it, change the business model and so on, and could have also easily killed the whole thing. So that's quite a fuck up, which you can avoid by doing your homework first, by knowing how, if the customer is interested, how does the legal situation look like? Are you really allowed to do it? I mean, at least to a certain extent. There's also the thing of don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, right.
But that's not an advice that you should follow all the time. So,
no, I can imagine. I think we have a question already. Rens, please ask a question yourself.
Yeah, hi Tilo. Thank you for your time. I was talking about the fuck-up nights, and many people know like the common downfalls of startup culture and building your startup, which are lack of team, lack of product market fit. But what is an element that is often overlooked?
I think those were 2 very important ones already, but I still think that the biggest point often overlooked is really, is there a problem that you can solve? So have you understood the problem of your customers, of the users fully? And do you know how you can solve it and how they want it? So, and that's another point which people often overlook. Yes, there's a customer who wants it, but they also don't see the bigger picture, which is especially in the platform businesses. it's not really only the one who's paying for this, but it's also the user and so on. So there's a multi-sided platform business, and you really need to figure out all of your customer segments and all of their pains and needs and what they're wishing for using your solution, and also how they want it, because it really doesn't work if you just consider one of the customer segments and make it perfectly fine for them, but the other ones you didn't have a look at all, and then this whole thing doesn't really work. So make sure you really understand who your customers are, what kind of problems they have, or wishes they have that you can solve, and then make sure you have understood these and are able to, in a small way, start a solution for that and see if it delivers the value that you think it should.
All right, thank you. I actually have a follow-up question, Peter.
Okay, you can do a second one.
All right, so because you're talking about platform, and we do have a lot of platform startups in our ecosystem, and they often struggle with the chicken egg problem, that either you need the users to join first or the suppliers, but there has to be something, because otherwise one of the parties will leave the platform. How would you advise to solve that problem?
Well, that's the chicken egg problem is the same problem that we usually have within our program with the platform businesses. And I don't have an answer to that, to be honest, because it really depends on what you're trying to achieve with your platform, what kind of customer segments you have. But yeah, I'd say you could still test it. You can fake a lot of things. You can pretend to have already a lot of content in there that you can use in order to see if other people are interested in joining the platform, and then all that kind of smoke test and so on to really say, hey, sorry, you caught us when we weren't ready. So at least you can test the interested. And what I think makes it easier to actually start and grow is by really defining, again, your customer segment and make sure you have even identified your early adopters, because they are more likely to forgive certain things, even though it's not ready yet, and you have more freedom to test things and stay in touch with these early adopters. And by having them on board early stage, you're also then able to test it with them and then grow into a bigger customer segments, so you don't burn them right away.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rens. And what I wonder, we have a lot of potential startups and real startups here in the Zoom link. If they apply in your program, how does it work? You can apply. Is it kind of rating or review? How do you do that?
So how we do it for our applications that we're receiving, it works like that. So they can fill out an application form, which has the following topics like what's the problem that you think you've identified, who is involved in that, what are the customer segments, how big is the size of the opportunity internally or also on an external market. So we don't expect you to have numbers and everything on that, but we would like you to give us an impression on that as well. What might be your vision, because for us it's also very important that the people that are doing this not only start doing it and once it's solved it's over, because we also want them to think it further and share their vision on this, because that's and a very important part about doing this startup journey for us is the motivation, and that's what we're asking with the vision and so on, and of course also how it works from a business perspective. What kind of costs will it have, the revenue streams, and so on. So once they fill this out, they can apply. We will have a look at that. How big is the potential internally? Is it scalable across different divisions, regions, and so on? And
if you talk about divisions, does it has to be related to DHL?
Not necessarily. So it should be somehow related to logistics. But if the vision is that we want to become a big player in the external market, then of course that's also something that we first of all see, okay, these people are motivated, they want to take it to the next level, and they think big. So that's something for us that's very important, because we first of all deal a lot with the team and not so much with the project itself. We want them to motivate to go a different path and so on. So therefore, that's a very crucial point for us.
Okay.
And it needs to be scalable. When we're shortlisting across regions and divisions within an internal and an external market, whatever it is looking at. And then if they're allowed to the first phase, they will just be looking at the problem. They will do custom interviews. They will in depth understand what is the problem of my potential customers. They will do several rounds of customer interviews, really to dig deeper on this one. They will also do research on the market size, on existing alternatives, on workarounds that people might be using, on competitors and so on. So to really not build something together, which you can just go there and buy. Then they will pitch in front of an innovation jury between phase 1 and 2, which is with representatives from the divisions that we have. And then they will say, yeah, we like that idea. We see the potential. Once they're approved, they will go into a second phase, which will then be about how can we put together a prototype, an MVP, however you define it, to actually solve this. And with a little more funding, they are also able to put some first codings together themselves or with external help, or really in a first step try to do it with no code. So just fake the whole functionalities and so on, and really see if they're able to solve the problem, and also start working on even more the potential business case behind this. How are they later on able to make money out of it? And then they are going to pitch in front of the corporate board between phase 2 and phase 3. And once they approve to go into the third phase, they will then be supported again to do a POC within the company, start a project out there, or a test run in an external market with customers, and then scale it up. So and then once the official Startup Lab program is over, they will be graduated, but we will still be supporting them with our network that we have, with potential contacts that might help them to even further scale up their businesses, and also with some legal guidance in case they want to do a spin-off and leave the company to become the CEOs of their own company, for example. So many different ways this could go at the end of the Startup Lab program.
Interesting. You mentioned funding. Do you provide funding if that is necessary?
Yes, we do. So in the first phase, it's really a very, very small amount. I think so roughly about 2,000 euros, which the team can use to get from A to B, to just make it possible for them to talk to customers, to invite them to have a coffee, whatever it is. So there's really not much invest that you need to do all this research into customer interviews. If they then make it into the second phase, they will have more funding, up to 20,000 euros, basically in order to put together a prototype or something to get help on visualization and on those kind of things. And then in a third step, potentially even more money to really scale it up, put together something that's working, that has a minimum feature set, so that they're able to deliver the value to the customer. And then after that, it's really depending on what do they need, and is it reasonable? And then it's really a very individual thing that they're asking for.
Okay, nice. Question coming in from Elmar about equity. So Elmar, can you ask the question yourself? Because I'm interested as well.
Yes, so do you take equity in the startups?
Yes, we do. It depends on the business model, and also on the situation of the founders and what they want. So for example, you have to imagine that a lot of people starting with a project in Startup Lab are working with the company for decades, and they just don't want to leave that easy. So for them, we also want to give them the opportunity to be responsible for it, but not with shares or being the owner of the company fully. So it really depends. We have different stages on equity and so on, and whether we as DPDHL in the end are interested in that business model. But otherwise, I think we have a pretty fair system so that there are some founders that want to leave the company with their project, which doesn't seem to be too much of interest for DPDHL. We make sure that the IP is transferred, and then they can start the business outside of DPDHL as well. We would then, for example, have no equity in that. But if it's something where DPDHL is still interested in, it would be part of negotiations and as well. But we would always make sure that it's fair for the founders themselves so that they have enough freedom. And it also depends on whether they, for example, would like to have additional external investment, because it's always hard for another VC if a big company like DPDHL is in there as well. So it really depends on every individual case.
Nice question. Thank you, Elmar. Are there a lot of DHL customers? No, not customers, employees, I mean, participating, and or mainly externals? How's that working?
It's mainly internals. So we also have some other programs, like, I don't know if you're familiar with it, Plug and Play, for example, so that we're scouting other external startups as well. We do that, but that's not part of the Startup Lab itself. The Startup Lab itself is really an internal incubation program. But I'm personally a big fan of also opening it up for external people with ideas, because I think that also brings more variety to the projects that we have within the program.
Yeah. Okay. And from all over the world, is there one lab in Germany, or are there several labs?
So currently there's one lab in Germany. We're thinking of ways how to actually scale our program ourselves, because I think that can only work through at least having some ambassadors within the country that know about this program very well, that, for example, have participated in that program and are alumni themselves, that can spread the word, but also search for potential ideas and projects out there and bring it to us. That would be first step, and then later on maybe also some other smaller startup things. But we have the Startup Lab itself, but we're also working very closely with other digitalization initiatives within the divisions, because they can much more focus on the individual topics that they have within the division. So, for example, supply chain is dealing with a whole lot of different topics that Express would, for example, do just based on the nature of their business and so on. So then we have opportunities like the Go Green initiative, zero emissions until 2050 and so on. So there's a lot of different initiatives going on that we also try to connect. And that's a big part of our program as well, really doing the whole network aspect.
I see. Can you mention some examples of successful startups that went into the program and now that's really in use?
Yeah. So we have one of the very first batches that we ran, that is Trailer. What they are doing is they put solar mats on top of the trucks that we're having. So as you can assume, being one of the biggest logistics provider, we have a big fleet all over the world. So what was happening in the past is that when the trucks were somewhere and had to be unloaded, for example, there's the lift at the end of this trailer, which you could only operate when the engine was running. So by putting solar mats on top of it, you were able to do it just with battery-powered systems, so that you would have fuel savings of something between 5 to 7%. Again, which having a big fleet is quite a lot. They're in an external market. They're also offering it to other companies. And then another interesting internal thing is... Sorry? Yeah.
One comment on this, because I see Elmar glowing up. He is specialized in converting solar energy into energy in solar cars. most successful worldwide. So he certainly is interested in this project. But okay,
like I'm working with Picnic now as well. They have like similar vehicles as DHL, like the small delivery things.
okay, thanks, Elmar. Thank you, Elmar.
I want to be I want to be in touch with like this.
Yes. But Tilo, please, your next example.
The next example is an internal thing, and just to show you how big the opportunity is, even within a company, is in supply chain, we are organized in clusters. So in certain countries, we are operating warehouses for different customers. So we have customer A and customer B, both in completely different industries, so they have different peak times. So what happens is during the different peak times when we have not enough workers in that warehouse A, we had to get people from external agencies to have more workforce equaling that peak and so on. So, but the other warehouse still had too many workers, which weren't occupied in that time. So they kind of, and that was their first pitch, put together the Tinder for that operations. So one side was requesting workforce from the other side. Based on the profile, I could say we need a forklift driver, we need a picker, and so on. And they would then send them over to actually make better use of our internal workforce, because they're also already trained on the equipment that we're having, on the guidelines and everything that are applied in the DHL warehouses. And that's, I think, a very good example for the scalability of such a thing. It started off in Brazil, but it's now applied in Thailand, in Ukraine, in Belgium, almost everywhere where it's legally possible to do it, and still growing a lot. So that's a very interesting thing. And also just the beginning. So you can share a lot of more things, not only the workforce, but also vacancy, equipment, and so on.
Nice examples.
Yeah.
What part of your work do you like most?
What part of the work I like most is probably really being connected to a lot of people from different countries, a lot of colleagues, and really experiencing the motivation, how people are starting things in Latin America, how people are starting things in China, and also staying in touch with them, working with them very closely, and see projects growing. So that network aspect on an international level is something I really, really enjoy.
Nice.
Yeah.
We're now in strange times. 2020 is the year of COVID. I'm at home, you're at home. How does that impact your program?
A lot, I'd say, because we did a lot of things physically. We tried to meet as many people as possible physically for workshops, for kickoffs, for graduation events, which is not possible currently. So we had to switch from doing many things on site to doing it remotely. But on the other hand, we did a lot of things already remotely because we're in an international program. So we had to stay in touch with people via video calls already before. So that was not really too big of a change for us. But still, you need to really structure the program in a way so that it's just 100% remotely. You need to make sure that you're delivering the content and the knowledge only via video calls and other materials. And that was a tough challenge at the very beginning, but I think we did it very well, and also we're experiencing a lot with it by doing things remotely. And I think it worked out quite nicely.
Okay, because I see that Rens has a question on that.
Yeah, hi Tilo. As already mentioned before, I'm going from Zoom call to Zoom call. I'm getting really tired of remotely working. How do you deal with it on a personal level, and how do you inspire the startups in your system to avoid remote working tiredness?
So same thing, especially when we started, one Zoom call was following up on the other one. So really back-to-back video calls. How to avoid being sick of all this video calls and that kind of stuff. I think it's not only doing the video calls, but it's really also using other tools that you just imagine how you would do things if you were on site. You would probably do a lot of writing on the whiteboard, write down a lot of sticky notes and so on, and finding alternatives for that. And then I think there's this mural which is a quite nice whiteboard tool where you can work on a lot of things simultaneously. And I think the combination of not only doing the video calls and sharing presentations, but really actively work on something during the call makes it a much better experience and gives you a better feeling of not only a feeling, but a high productivity during these calls, I would say. But still, you have to deal with it, and it's just the way it is that we have to do these calls currently. And therefore, another important thing is, I would say, you really have some set of rules and guidelines that everyone is paying attention to really make sure you're all attending these calls in the same way and pay the same attention to it.
Okay, thank you. I see also a nice question from Joe Laufer. Hi, Joe.
Hello. So there's a saying in the US, crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So I'm just curious, what innovation have you seen among the startups in your ecosystem, but also how has DHL reacted? Have you seen it stimulate innovation also within the company?
This crisis? Yes, it definitely has. So what I found really interesting was, and that's bringing me back to the example that I gave about sharing workforces, how can we actually use this in order to support our business? Because that was something that we applied for just supply chain internally, sharing workforce from one operation to the other. But that was the very good thing about the structure of our program. We have a lot of attention from the corporate board, and then we were all together thinking, how can we make use of this idea, not only support within supply chain, but also support between supply chain and post and parcel business or express business and other ones. So we were really sharing experiences and sharing workforce on that and try to overcome boundaries. So it's not the one specific in a innovative project that came out of it, but more the habits of how to deal with things and really put aside some boundaries and work together even more than before. And I think that's what this crisis led to, which I also appreciate and enjoy a lot.
Nice, thank you. What I wonder if there are applicants with ideas in the program, do they need to have a team?
We prefer them to have a team, but oftentimes this is not the case. So they have an idea themselves, they apply with it, and then we think it's okay for the start to start as a single team member. But throughout the process, or preferably during phase one, we want them to create a team around it. So what we're doing is connecting people that have some kind of similar ideas to potentially work on this together. Do some kind of matchmaking between other colleagues and the ones who have the idea. Because some applicants that we currently have, for example, they don't have an idea, they're just interested in experiencing the whole process. And I think they are very happy to connect them to someone who has an idea that they also think has potential. But our goal definitely is to have teams around these ideas at the end. So ideally up to 4 team members or something. So because then you have enough also resources and motivation to really continue and bring this to the next level.
Nice. If you do the application, there is a kind of pitch for a team that they part of the application. What do you personally look at or appreciate in the pitch?
What we appreciate if you can really feel that it's thought through, so that they have put some thought into, again, who is the customer, what kind of problem is it, and how do we intend to solve it. And of course, it's everything in that application document is not written in stone. We actually want them to think about it twice and change it over time. But just to see that they put some thought into this during the first step, I think that's really what we like to see.
Okay, nice. Question from Dima. Dima, please ask the question.
Yeah. Hi, Tilo. Thank you very much for your presentation. And the talk was really nice. I have a question about the main takeaways entrepreneurs get from your 5 steps program. So we discussed that every startup starts with who is your customer, what problem do you solve? What else maybe on personal level do they get out of it?
I think it's pretty much the way of working. It's of course the things that they need to pay attention to, but it's really also how do I work differently? In the corporate environment, it works like this. They have an idea for a project, they get it approved, they get some budget for this, and they need to spend it until the very last dime. Otherwise, they won't get the same funding next year and so on. And that's not what we pursue. So we really want them to think different. And also in the way of working, how to approach things, do it in a more agile way, not being afraid of sharing what has not worked, and take that learnings and do it differently, potentially when continuing with that project, but also starting off new projects. And that is really what we want to spread within the company as a cultural aspect, to also have changes regarding the culture, because we think once you went through this for the first time and you experienced that it didn't work out right away, but you still enjoyed the process and everything, you spread the word, other people are getting interested, and you yourself start working differently. And that's for me personally a very important thing that I want to achieve as well, that cultural change.
Okay, thanks for the question, Dimar. You have a cute kid, by the way. So
yeah.
Very nice. But Rens, there's another question about egos. Rens.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm actually also busy for my program to do matchmaking based on interest and similarity in ideas, because we also see that some people are really motivated, but are actually stuck with the wrong idea. And some people have a great idea, but need some motivation. Yeah. How do you prevent ego coming in the way? Because people can think, it's my baby, it's my idea. How do you prevent that?
Pretty much by what we want them to do, by talking to the customers, and startups say no startup survives their first customer contact, because they will all tell you something different than from what you were expecting. So just to make that experience that not everything is the way you thought it was, and see things are different, and that it's really not a shame to learn from it, to take it and then see how you can integrate this into your project. And also that you are not the one coming up with the perfect solution for that, but sometimes also the customers that you're talking to have thought about ways how to solve the problem themselves, and that this is also a good input that you can use to come up with an even better solution. And as you said correctly, a lot of founders, so to say, they're in love with their idea, which I was myself, for example, starting off with that Cocktail-fiets back then. But I think this is what you need to have in order to start things. So otherwise, if you would not be in love with it, it would be very hard, and you would potentially or probably not find that motivation in order to continue. But you also need to be open to the fact that you need to change it over time. You need to be open to the feedback. You need to change your solution. You need to change the business model. And that does not mean that it was wrong at the very beginning, but it's just the way to make things better. And it's a lot of talking. It's a lot of experiences throughout the program, but it's not like the golden key or anything in order to, on the one hand, motivate someone who's not that motivated. On the other hand, tell someone who's very much in love with their own idea.
Nice.
Cool. Thank you.
Innovation is important for every company, small or big. DHL is a huge company. How important is the lab for the company?
I think it's very important for various reasons. I think, first of all, to give people the chance to actually work on things, to put together new ideas, new projects, and also make them successful. But equally important to me, again, that cultural aspect, to tell people that there are different ways to for working with projects that they can apply, like again methodologies and so on, to really force this cultural change and everything, but also to share what we know and share it with other innovation activities, digitalization initiatives, as I said, in the other divisions, because we don't want to be the center of excellence for innovation, and everyone doing something innovative needs to come to us. Otherwise, it would not be possible. We really want to create a change within the company, and therefore also educate other people to the extent that they can do it themselves, I think. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
So
just saw in the background, kid coming by. I assume you're a dad. And Rens has a question about it.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, it's me again. Yeah, I saw the baby as well. So I was wondering, what is the best lesson that you've learned as a father that would apply to startups?
Be patient, definitely. So considering the startup is your baby, you need to be patient. You sometimes think that it's a great idea. I'm still very much in love with it. And when other people hear about it, they will think the same way, and they will just spend all their money on my idea. That's not going to happen. Just the same way as the baby is not going to walk right away and talk to you what's the problem and so on. It's a lot of crying, a lot of figuring out what is the right way to do. And that's pretty much the same way as you have to do it with the startups. You have to learn every day and figuring out the way to make it work.
Nice.
Oh, thank you.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
We discussed a lot about your career, the steps you made, but you're already planned the next step in your career. Can you tell about it?
Yeah, that's true. So at the beginning of next year, I will join a much smaller logistics company called Emons here in Cologne, also doing business worldwide, but obviously not in scale as DHL is doing it. So we're on 3 continents with a couple of thousand people. But why I'm looking forward to this challenge is because they're really motivated to figure out how we'll be doing business in the next decade. So it's a family-owned business existing since 1928. So it's a very long time for a company, I would say. And they're very good and experienced in what they're doing. Also a healthy company, but I really like the fact that even though the situation is good, they're quite wealthy, figuring out how can we go on in the future and what kind of digital businesses will we do, for example, that are supporting our core business, but also figuring out new ways on how to do business. And that is the opportunity which I will be doing next year, then as the head of digitalization within that company.
Sounds challenging.
Yeah.
As a head of digitalization, what are the upcoming technologies that will be important in, let's say, the next 5 years?
Well, that's an interesting question. So I think a lot of that technologies connecting, for example, vehicles. We have that project going on with platooning, so that whereas a lot of AI and cars are communicating to lower the distance, and you can save more fuel on the road and those kind of things. It's a lot of AI when it comes to invoicing processes and so on, and avoid mistakes in there and save a lot of money. But also, I mean, there's a lot of robotics potentially that you can use in order to support the operations in the picking processes and loading and unloading and so on. It's a lot of things, really. So I cannot tell you it's this thing, but a lot of influences that will be there during the next 5 years and beyond.
Nice, nice. Okay, so we have some time for a question, in this case from Josse. Please open your microphone and ask a question.
Yes. Yes, Tilo, great story. Thanks for all the learnings so far. It was very interesting. I have a question on most of the experiments that are being used in startup land are focused on B2C. And yeah, you set up a smoke test, and if a consumer doesn't like it, he's turned off. But it's okay because there's so many other consumers. But in B2B, you deal with very strong relationships, and well, a lot of colleagues might be looking along with you that you're not hurting the strategic relationship. I'm guessing that the DHL has a lot of these kind of relationships as well. How do you deal with it? Do you do similar experiments, or do you something very different?
It's a good point. So sometimes running a smoke test or putting out a landing page, and which just it's not the way to go if you have really serious relationships with other customers. So what we do is we try to go different ways. We try to do a lot of customer exploration and problem validation before together with them, stay in close relationship with them to really have them on board right away. And then figuring out how can we do, for example, a proof of concept together? How can we together create a no-code MVP or a click dummy and implement it in our operations or even together with the customer. So to really all together work on this in the operations, but not like burning them by having some fake landing page out there. So it's really open communication right away. Having also letters of intent, for example, is something that you can then at least show to the corporate board. And having a POC done and having the data and showing the benefits for us internally, but also for the customer is always a very good thing that we do in B2B cases.
Yeah, great. Thanks. That explains a lot. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Josse. I think we are all already at the end of a full hour. Thank you so much, Tilo.
You're welcome.
For, the insight in your career in the lab of DHL, and good luck in your next step in the career. And I hope we can follow it, and we'll see more of you.
Thank you very much.
So thanks, and I give the microphone back to Rens.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Tilo. It's me yet again. I would like to thank you as well for the inspiring story. Personally, I really liked all these innovative practices that you talked about and explained, and how you use them both at DHL Startup Lab and in your other ventures. So that was really interesting. I also wanted to thank you, Peter, again for hosting it. It was a delight. For this season, we have only 2 talks remaining. Next week, we will be talking with Victor Jan from kaas.com. And on the 10th of December, we have a MedTech deep dive session with Sharam Sharif from Linda Care. For everybody interested in entrepreneurship, look at novelty.com/start. If you want to see more on what we do publicly, look at novelty.com/events. And for the rest, thank you everybody for joining. Thanks for the question. And I hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.